But for me, like Clubhouse, it's also been one of the greatest connection tools that I've ever used. And
why is a podcast important if you want to be an influencer? Maybe one or two.
So I'm in this studio here. It was built out to do voiceover work for my primary business. And I had a mentor of mine, actually, I think I told you about this too. A mentor of mine, at one point I owed him $750,000. And he just showed up in my office one day. I didn't even know who he was. He was a silent partner of this other guy I was doing business with. And he wanted to make sure that he was going to get paid. And so he was kind of touring our offices, and he saw this place that we built out, which cost about $750,000. And he said, "What are you doing with this room? You know?" And I said, "It's voiceover work." And he said, "This is 7 years ago." And he's like, "You should do a podcast." And I was like, "Well, who am I going to interview?" You know? He's like, "Well, why don't you start with the people here?" Like, I'm in this place called the Cumming Center in Beverly, Massachusetts. You can Google it. It's a pretty interesting place. It was one of the first factories in the United States, the United Shoe Factory. It's 11 acres of office space. Some of the biggest companies in the world are here. And said, just find people and just interview them. And so I did, and that's what I started doing. And it was kind of awkward at first because I didn't really know the format. I didn't really listen to podcasts that much. And it was here live in the studio, and you're looking at them, so it's a little more intimate, and it's still a little more awkward. It's kind of a small space. But then it started to grow, and I started to get more people on it. And this is now in year 7. I've started to kind of monetize it a little bit now, where we're getting sponsors. But for me, like Clubhouse, it's also been one of the greatest connection tools that I've ever used. And so when you're good at it, which I am, and you have somebody like a Grant Cardone on, or Sharon Lecter, who's your mentor, or Brian Buffini, who's a huge real estate guy, and Lewis Howes, and I've had huge guests on, right? And they see Les Brown. I can just keep going on and on. Called the Alden Report, by the way. They see the value that I bring. They're willing to come on, even though I don't necessarily have like millions of downloads, right? But they see the value that I bring and the quality of the interview, so that they can take that content and then use it if they want as well. And then it becomes a great connection tool for me. So now, most of the times, as you know, most times you need their contact information, and so that you could be their email or their cell phone or both. So now you're building your Rolodex with people, and you can also build a rapport with people fairly quickly before, during, and after the podcast as well, like the day of and then after as well. So I also tell people, if you're interested in growing your business, I don't care if your business is about doggy daycares. I'm sure there's podcasts out there about them. Start a podcast and don't worry about it. I had Casey Adams on. I don't know if you know who he is. Casey Adams was 16. He was a social media guy, 16. And I reached out to him because I was blown away by what he was doing in social media at 16, right? Come to find out, now he's 21. I just had him back on the podcast. Come to find out, I was the first one to ever interview him. His Instagram handle is @Casey, right? So this kid, when I scheduled him on my podcast when he was 16, it was no joke. It was in between dinner and lacrosse practice, right? But now this kid just closed his first seed round at 21. Wow. For a company that he's starting called Media Kits. And I helped him actually with his book. I helped him get his book to #1. I did it for nothing because he was only 16 at the time. And so as a tool to grow your business in your connection capital, again, the title of my next book, nothing out there greater than that, because of that personal one-on-one connection. And lastly, the one thing I'll say to people who think about, I'm not a tech guy. I'm looking at like a mixing board, and I don't even know how to, I think I've turned it on and off. That's it. But just yesterday, I was in Maine. I had a scheduling conflict. I posted this on my Instagram. It's at Michael Alden 2012. You can see it. It's the second time I did it. Last time I did it, I did a podcast in my car in a parking lot at a rest stop in Maine. The woman that I did it with is a former U.S. ambassador. Okay, a former U.S. ambassador. She's worked at the Pentagon. She's worked for presidents. She is a very powerful woman. And there was no way I was canceling it, but there was also no way I could get out of this other thing. I screwed up. I had a scheduling conflict. I did that podcast in my car on my laptop using the Wi-Fi from my phone, connecting my laptop to Zoom so we could do it. So the reason why I'm telling you that is that don't worry about the equipment. Don't worry about the fact that I got some fancy microphone and you have your studio and all this other stuff. You don't need any of that stuff. If you really wanted to, you could do your podcast right from your phone. I'm not kidding. From your phone with the voice recorder, with the headphones and the microphone that comes with your phone. It can be done. You just have to start doing it. My first infomercial that generated now close to $175 million. A lot of people talk shit on Clubhouse, like this shit's verifiable. I spent $6,000. I shot it in a basement in Gloucester, Massachusetts. I'm orange. He's pale. The backdrop is a mess. You can see the floor. There's what we call jump cuts. It's a disaster from a production value standpoint, but the content is fucking gold. And so, so don't get caught up in the production value, even though it's easy now to get all this technology. Just go ahead and start it. People say, oh, it's kind of cliche-ish, but if you really want to do it, like if you're thinking about it, don't get caught up in all the production. What should I use? Should I use this, StreamYard, all this other stuff? We're on Zoom. It's pretty simple. You can do it for free. I think you and I have the paid version of it. Even the paid version is like $45 a month or whatever it is. It's really easy to do. Just fucking do it.